There's a strange kind of silence that doesn't come from the absence of sound, but from the collapse of meaning within it. It's the silence that vibrates behind city traffic, the hum of machines, the whisper of 1,000 unseen lives moving through concrete veins. It's the sound of everything and nothing at once. Every metropolis has its own pulse. At first it feels alive. Lights flicker like thoughts, engines roar like hunger, screens breathe like restless gods. But if you listen long enough, you begin to notice something different beneath the rhythm. An undercurrent that isn't quite human, a hidden frequency. It's not the city speaking, it's the silence beneath it trying to be heard. This is where our story begins. In that uneasy gap between noise and quiet, where the world outside and the world within finally blur. Where sound becomes memory and memory becomes echo. Where the silence doesn't comfort, it exposes. Every sound you hear after this point will mean something different. A bus engine becomes a heartbeat, a siren turns into confession, and the static between two voices becomes the space where truth hides. The noise beneath silence is not made by the world. It's made by us. Every unspoken thought, every unprocessed fear, every emotion buried under the need to appear okay. It all vibrates there, humming softly beneath the illusion of control. And once you hear it, you can't unhear it. Because the real chaos isn't out there, echoing through the streets. It's inside. Cities have memories. They just don't speak in words. They whisper through cracks in the pavement, stains on old walls, the faint smell of rain mixed with dust. Every street you've ever walked keeps an imprint of you. The weight of your footsteps, the rhythm of your breath, the echo of something you once thought and quickly forgot. Under daylight, everything feels ordinary. Cars, noise, movement, routine. But at night, when the street's empty and the air grows heavy, the city starts remembering. It remembers who passed through in silence, who ran in fear, who laughed so hard it changed the air for a second. It remembers the ones who never came back. Every shadow you see after midnight is history replaying itself. A flicker of a life that once crossed this same intersection, carrying a dream that never reached its end. The walls absorb it all, the arguments, the prayers, the sound of someone waiting for someone who never arrived. And when the wind turns a corner, it releases pieces of those memories back into the night, like dust disturbed by time. If you listen carefully, you can hear it. Not a voice, but a presence. Something old, watching, breathing through neon light and decay. The city doesn't forget because forgetting is a human privilege. Streets remember everything. They remember us long after we've forgotten ourselves. Somewhere between the flicker of a streetlight and the hum of a passing car, your shadow detaches from you. It begins to live a second life, one that mirrors everything you hide. It lingers in places you've already left, replaying your gestures, your pauses, your silent hesitations. While you move forward, it stays behind, tracing your absence. We often think of shadows as harmless, silhouettes bound to light. But under the neon glare of the city, they become something else. Proof that we exist only in fragments. Your reflection lies. Your face adapts. But your shadow? It never learns to pretend. It carries your truth, even when you don't. In every window you pass, your image fractures, multiplied, distorted, consumed by glass and glare. But your shadow remains intact, dark and honest. It knows every place you've stood, every thought you buried, every moment you chose silence over confrontation. It's the version of you that doesn't perform, the one that stays still when you flee. If you could speak to it, what would you say? Would you apologize for leaving it behind? Or ask it what it's seen while you were busy becoming someone else? Because the shadow named you is not just what follows, it's what remembers. And sometimes, when the night is quiet enough, you might feel it watching, not with judgment but recognition. Loneliness doesn't always arrive with silence. Sometimes it wears the form of a building. Steel bones, glass skin, structures that rise into the sky but never touch anything real. They reflect sunlight but never warmth. You walk past them every day, and they never look back. Cities are built on blueprints, but they age like people. Their angles soften, their walls crack, and in those cracks, solitude seeps in. You see it in apartment windows lit at 3 a.m. One lamp, one soul, one flickering screen holding back the darkness. You see it in elevators where no one speaks, in lobbies that echo too much, in stairwells that feel like they were never meant to be climbed. Solitude has texture. It feels like cold tile under bare feet. It smells like dust in sunbeams no one notices. It sounds like footsteps that don't echo because no one is listening. We live among structures, but we rarely ask who they're built for. Function or connection, shelter or isolation. In this city, every building is a confession. The office that stays lit long after its workers have gone home. The luxury tower where no one opens the windows. The cafe with a dozen tables but only one soul looking up from their screen. These aren't ruins. They're not abandoned. They're full. And still, somehow, they're empty. Because architecture can create space. But only we decide if it becomes home or exile. It starts with a sound, soft, rhythmic, almost forgiving. Rain against glass. As if the sky is trying to wash the city clean, one drop at a time. But neon doesn't fade. It refracts. The light breaks, splits, bleeds into the puddles. And suddenly the street is no longer a street. It's a mirror, a memory, a wound. Rain is the city's only honest voice. It doesn't argue, it doesn't sell, it doesn't scroll. It just falls, equally, everywhere. It turns concrete into reflection, turns shadows into brushstrokes. And for a few minutes, everything feels softer, even the silence. There's something cinematic about rain at night, not because it's beautiful, but because it hides things. Tears look the same. So do regrets. You can walk through it, soaked in thoughts, and no one will ask why. You can disappear for a while and return as someone new, or no one at all. Glass holds the neon like skin holds memory. It stains, it absorbs, and when you press your hand against it, the warmth disappears instantly, as if the city doesn't want to be touched. But the rain doesn't care. It keeps falling. In a world obsessed with clarity, rain blurs everything, and maybe that's the point. Maybe we were never meant to see everything clearly. Maybe the truth is found in what's distorted, in the glow that shatters, in the reflection that ripples, in the version of ourselves we only meet when it rains. You don't choose what you want anymore. Something else does. Behind every scroll, every ad, every suggested video, a silent intelligence watches, not with eyes, but with patterns. It sees your hesitation, your pauses, the things you didn't click, but almost did. Desire used to be unpredictable, wild, painful, beautiful. Now it's categorized, optimized, turned into heat maps and engagement metrics. The algorithm doesn't care what you love, only what keeps you. And slowly, it shapes you, not through force, but through repetition. A new face, a better body, a curated lifestyle. Desire, once born in silence and mystery, is now generated in code. And we follow it blindly, not because we believe in it, but because it's easier than longing for something real. We confuse convenience for connection, validation for intimacy, the like for the look, the swipe for the spark. But in this system of infinite options, something essential gets lost. The ache, the waiting, the unfiltered humanity of wanting something you might never receive. Desire is no longer something we feel. It's something we're fed. And the more we consume it, the less it belongs to us. If you've ever felt something missing after getting exactly what you thought you wanted, You've already met the algorithm. Midnight isn't a time. It's a threshold. A quiet unraveling that the clocks can't measure. A moment when the city finally exhales. And all the noise you've ignored during the day comes back, whispering in the language of absence. At midnight, nothing performs. Shops close. Windows go dark. Even the streetlights seem hesitant, casting pale halos that don't quite reach the ground. It's the hour when nothing asks to be seen, and that's when the truth starts showing itself. There are no witnesses here, only you, and the echo of the person you thought you were. You might hear your own footsteps too clearly. You might feel watched, not by people, but by the city itself, not judging, just remembering. Every shortcut you took, every door you never opened, every word you didn't say. You can't hide in midnight, because nothing distracts you anymore. The feeds are quiet, the messages stop, and in that stillness, you are forced to sit with the version of yourself that daylight lets you outrun. It's not scary because of what's out there. It's scary because of what wakes up inside you when the world stops watching. At midnight, everything becomes real. The loneliness, the regrets, the ache for something you don't have a name for, and the terrifying beauty of finally being alone with it. They don't knock, they don't creak, they don't wear white sheets or drag chains down the hall. They arrive in notifications, in memories you didn't ask to see, in a name you haven't typed in months that suddenly reappears, a phantom conjured by the code. The ghosts of our time aren't trapped in graveyards. They live in the cloud, in old text threads, in shared playlists, in location tags that still pulse long after someone is gone. Not dead, just absent, but not really, because the internet remembers them even if your life has tried to forget. You've felt it, haven't you? That sudden ache when a picture resurfaces, you laughing beside someone who's now a stranger, or the way your phone autofills their name, as if it still believes in the version of you that needed them. These aren't coincidences. They're hauntings, engineered by algorithms but powered by something much older. Unfinished emotion. We think of ghosts as things that need closure. But what if they're the ones asking us to stop pretending? What if they appear not to scare us, but to remind us what we've buried under routine and distraction? The Wi-Fi is always on. So are the ghosts. Floating quietly between cell towers, waiting in silence on hard drives, gliding through our scrolling fingers like whispers we refuse to hear. And every time we feel them, in a message never sent, in a presence we can't name, we're reminded, not everything that's invisible is gone. It didn't happen all at once. Cities don't collapse overnight. They dissolve slowly, not in concrete, but in meaning. It begins with small things. A park replaced by a parking lot. A cafe turned into a chain. A mural painted over with an ad. People stop making eye contact. Doors stay closed. And the ones who leave don't come back. You start to feel it, not as fear, but as a kind of forgetting. Like something sacred was misplaced and no one noticed. Or worse, no one cared. Cities were once built around fires, stories, communities. Now they orbit around signals, delivery drones, and buildings made of mirrored glass. Perfect surfaces that reflect everything and connect to nothing. You can walk through the center of a metropolis and feel no pulse, only motion, only commerce, only noise without voice. A city without a soul still functions. The trains still run, the lights still shine. But you'll feel the difference in how heavy your steps become, in how strangers avoid touch like contagion, in how even beauty here feels fabricated. There are cities that inspire, and there are cities that extract. This one, it forgets. It forgets why it was born, and in doing so teaches everyone living inside it how to forget themselves too. You catch your reflection in a shop window. It looks like you. But something feels off. The posture, the expression, the way the eyes hesitate, as if they're not waiting for you but watching you. In cities full of glass and chrome, mirrors are everywhere. But reflections aren't loyal. They don't just show you who you are. They show you who you've become when no one was looking. The truth is, we don't always recognize ourselves anymore. Not after all the roles we've played, the versions we've updated, the filters we've worn so long they started feeling like skin. The reflection smiles. But was that you? Or the idea of you? Or the version you crafted to survive the day, to get the job, to protect the heart, to belong in a system that demands masks over minds? Reflections are liars, not because they distort, but because they're too honest. They capture you in a moment you weren't ready to confront. Sometimes you pass a mirror and feel exposed. Other times, you pass one and feel nothing. That's when you know something deeper is fractured. When your reflection starts to look like a stranger, you're tired of pretending to know. In a city where everything reflects, glass walls, black screens, passing cars, you start to wonder, what if all these reflections are just illusions? What if the real you only lives in the places that can't reflect you back at all? We used to fall in love in secret. Letters hidden beneath pillows. Glances stolen on crowded trains. Hands brushing in the dark. Now, love lives beneath glass. Tracked, time-stamped, archived by satellites and sold to advertisers. You say, "I miss you," and your phone hears it. The next ad knows it. And suddenly, the most intimate parts of you belong to everyone except the person you meant them for. Even affection has a digital signature. Blue ticks, last seen, typing. We measure care through activity, not presence. Connection has become a performance monitored by invisible eyes, not for safety, but for profit. You think your moments are private, but every smile you send, every tear you hide behind a screen, is watched by machines that don't feel. You search for love. They search for patterns. And in this world of visibility, love becomes something it was never meant to be. Quantifiable. We confuse access with intimacy. We track instead of trust. And we wonder why we feel more alone the more connected we become. There was a time when love meant vulnerability. Now it means exposure. To fall in love is to risk being seen by more than just one person, by systems, by strangers, by yourself, in ways that make you uncomfortable. But maybe real love still exists in the spaces between messages, in the pauses, in the moments you choose not to share, because some things are sacred, especially now. Walk down any quiet street and you'll feel it. Not the past, but the futures that never arrived. The bookstore that closed before you read what you needed. The apartment that never held the love you planned for. The job you almost took. The version of you that would have existed if the world had just been a little softer, a little slower, a little more kind. We imagine history as something behind us, but some ghosts wear tomorrow's clothes. They linger in vacant lots, in half-finished buildings, in notes left unsent on phones you no longer use. They live in the what-ifs, in the almosts, in the sighs you release when no one's watching. This is the Museum of Lost Futures, and you've been visiting it all your life. It has no doors because you carry it inside you. A gallery of dreams deferred, painted in quiet grief and soft regret. Every decision you made meant others were left behind. Roads that remain unwalked, versions of yourself that will never get to speak. And yet, they're not truly gone. They wait in your reflection, in the tension between contentment and longing, in the stories you start but never finish. We are all curators of our own private museums, not of what we've done, but of what we almost became. And some nights, especially the quiet ones, we walk their halls, looking for something we lost before we even knew it was ours. You used to meet people in places. Now you meet them in signals. A vibration in your pocket. A green dot on a screen. A typing bubble that appears, then disappears without ever saying what it meant to. We float past each other like frequencies. Not bodies, not stories, just pings, notifications, blue lights in the dark, a presence reduced to a timestamp, a read receipt, an unseen message sitting quietly in the back end of someone else's attention. We don't talk, we transmit, fragments of thought, curated images, filtered feelings, and in all that noise, we've somehow lost the sound of real connection. You walk past a stranger and never wonder who they are, but you'll scroll through their life at 3 a.m., learn their heartbreak, their playlist, the names of pets they no longer have, without ever knowing the color of their voice. Signals don't linger, they pass, like a train you didn't board, like a memory that isn't yours but still makes you feel something. We live in a world of proximity without presence. We are reachable, but not held, available, but not seen. And maybe that's the hardest part. We weren't made to be signals. We were made to be stories. But the longer we stay wired in, the more we risk becoming just another flicker on someone's screen, forgotten the moment they swipe to the next one. Look up. That's not a sky anymore. It's a screen. A glowing canvas for drones, satellites, surveillance balloons, a ceiling of silent machinery, watching. Once, the sky was a place for dreaming. You'd lie on rooftops and trace your hopes across the stars. Now it's a place for streaming, signal strength, coverage maps. Your dreams rerouted through bandwidth. We don't wish on stars now. We refresh. We check for updates. We look up not for wonder, but for reception. Clouds used to carry storms. Now they carry data. The sky is full, not of gods or birds or wild possibility, but of tracking systems, weather AI, and advertisements dropped from orbit. Space has become real estate. The infinite sold off in segments we'll never own. And maybe we haven't noticed, because the lights are still pretty. But something is missing. The silence, the depth, the haunting reminder that we're small, that we don't control everything. A synthetic sky doesn't ask you to wonder. It just wants you to stay connected. And the tragedy is, we are. Connected to everything, except the part of ourselves that used to gaze upward and ask, what if? What now? What beyond? When the sky becomes synthetic, so do we. It was supposed to set us free, a place without borders, without permission, where voices could rise, and connection could mean something deeper than proximity or power. But now, the internet feels tired, bloated, heavy with noise, yet starved of meaning. You feel it when you open your feed and everything looks the same. Different faces, same captions, same trends dressed in slightly different colors. A loop of content designed not to inspire, but to keep you scrolling. Not to speak to you, but to harvest you. There was a time when the web felt alive, like a back alley full of possibility. A midnight conversation in a forgotten forum. A song discovered that felt like it belonged to only you. Now it feels like a mall. All surface, no soul. And still, we keep logging in. Because where else would we go? The streets outside are cold. The people inside are distant. So we return to the glow, hoping it might remember what it once was. But maybe this isn't an end. Maybe it's a reckoning. An elegy not for a platform, but for the way we once believed that infinite connection could heal finite wounds. The internet isn't dying because we used it. It's dying because we forgot why we needed it in the first place. Walk into any store, scroll through any feed, and you'll see them. The new idols. Shiny, sleek, smiling without depth. They promise beauty, control, a future tailored to you, as long as you never ask who's tailoring it. As long as you don't mind trading your soul for next-day delivery. We used to dream in colors pulled from sunsets, from poems, from things that took time to unfold. Now we dream in plastic. We dream in high gloss. We dream in algorithms preloaded with someone else's definition of success. They told us to worship progress. So we did. We built altars from unboxing videos, prayed with credit cards, and sang in hashtags. But something's wrong. Because the more we buy, the less we feel. The more we upgrade, the more obsolete we become. The chrome gods don't love us. They don't listen. They reflect us back, but hollowed, smoothed, marketed. And somewhere along the way, we forgot how to dream without being sold something. We stopped imagining futures that weren't monetized. We stopped asking if our desires were ever ours to begin with. There's nothing wrong with wanting, but there's something deeply wrong when what we want is the very thing making us forget what it means to be human. Absence has shape. It forms around us like architecture. A hallway with no footsteps, a chair always left empty, a message that never arrives. It's not a void, it's design. Carefully constructed from what's missing, structured in the spaces between words, between glances, between lives that almost intersected but didn't. Cities understand this well. They build silence into their systems, vacant apartments lit by no one, park benches worn smooth by solitude, bridges that span more than just distance. They carry the weight of what was never said. Absence isn't the opposite of presence. It's its own presence. Louder sometimes. You feel it in rooms full of people where no one sees you. You feel it when you scroll endlessly and still don't feel held. You feel it in conversations where your words echo back as silence. And we design our lives around it. We place it like furniture, avoid it, step around it, pretend we chose it. But deep down, we know it chose us. The geometry of absence is precise. It cuts clean. It shapes our memories by omission, etches our identities in the outline of what we've lost, what we long for, what we pretend we never needed. And in this carefully designed emptiness, we wait, not to be filled, but to be seen through the shape of what we're missing. There's a strange kind of sacredness underground, not in temples, but in tunnels, not in silence, but in the steady chant of machinery, metal grinding against metal, voices layered with static, the rhythm of arrival and departure repeating like a prayer you didn't know you were saying. Every subway is a sermon, each stop a verse, and the faces, tired, unreadable, holy in their own quiet way, become a congregation of ghosts moving together yet never meeting. You stand, suspended between 2 points, held by fluorescent light and the brief illusion of motion as meaning. And in that liminal space, beneath the city, beneath your schedule, beneath your identity, you begin to wonder, what am I chasing? What am I running from? Who am I when I'm not going anywhere but still moving? The subway doesn't answer. It just hums. It carries you, without judgment, through layers of earth and memory and unresolved thought. Sometimes you catch your own reflection in the black window, distorted by speed, fractured by passing light. And for a moment, it feels like a psalm, a hymn not of praise but of presence. Because down here, beneath the noise of the world, you begin to hear the faintest truth. That motion is not meaning. And waiting, in the right silence, is its own kind of prayer. You think you're the observer, standing still, looking out. But what if the glass isn't passive? What if the window has memory? What if it watches you the same way you stare through it, quiet, patient, unblinking? In cities, windows are everywhere. They line towers, buses, screens. They separate you from the weather, from strangers, from yourself. They let light in, but also reflection. You stand before one, lost in thought, and there you are. Not as you feel, but as you appear. Framed, composed, incomplete. Windows reveal more than they hide. They turn you into scenery. Background for someone else's life. A blurred silhouette in a cafe. A shape outlined by night. And without realizing it, you become an image. Observed. Defined by what someone else sees or expects. But the most haunting thing is when a window shows you a version of yourself you don't remember becoming. Not older, not different, just distant, familiar but fading, like a dream half remembered. There's something intimate about glass. It doesn't touch you, but it knows you were there. It holds the warmth of your breath, records the press of your fingertips, and keeps the imprint long after you've gone. And maybe that's why it feels like it's watching. Because part of you never really leaves. You've smelled it before. That sharp, sterile scent hanging in the air after the computer crashes, before the lights flicker back on. It's not smoke. It's not fire. It's presence. Electricity doesn't just move through wires. It hums through cities, through screens, through your skin when the world is too loud and everything pulses at once. There's a tension to it, a pressure, like the air before a storm or a thought you're afraid to finish. It's the odor of systems running too long, of machines overheating, of something unnatural pretending to be necessary. It smells like progress, but also fatigue, like the charge in a waiting room before bad news. Like static building up between two people who haven't touched in weeks. We are surrounded by invisible currents, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, 5G, all around us, a silent empire buzzing, efficient, hungry. And in this electric world, our bodies begin to mimic the machines. Our minds flicker, our focus splinters, our hearts sink to artificial rhythms, notifications instead of conversation, brightness instead of presence. And yet, we rarely notice the weight of it until it lingers in a closed room, until the air feels thick with things we can't explain, until the lights go out, and for the first time, you realize what silence really feels like. That smell wasn't just electricity, it was everything we've forgotten how to live without. There's always a border, not drawn with lines or fences, but with certainty. Beyond this point, the GPS flickers. The streets lose their names. The signs don't match the language you know. We build our lives on maps. Carefully charted routes, safe distances between choices. But what happens when you go somewhere that doesn't exist on anyone else's grid? Sometimes you find yourself standing in the middle of your life and realizing there's no path forward, just noise, just questions, just you. You try to zoom out, retrace, predict, recalculate. But the truth is, you're off the map now, where logic fades, where identity fractures, where nothing is guaranteed except the weight in your chest and the silence in your step. But maybe this is where it begins, where control dies and freedom begins to breathe, where you stop chasing directions and start listening to the terrain beneath your feet. Because not all places need coordinates. Some are felt, not found. A memory that never happened. A dream that changes every time you wake. The edge of the map isn't the end. It's the invitation to get lost on purpose, to see what only appears when the known disappears. And in that unknown, you don't find answers. You find a mirror, waiting. They glow in the dark like altars, held in hands, propped on nightstands, worshipped before sleep. You don't call it prayer. But what else do you call the act of staring into a light, hoping for something to answer back? We don't kneel anymore. We scroll. We refresh. We wait for signs in notifications, search for meaning in timelines, confess in search bars what we'd never say aloud, and the screen listens, silently, endlessly. It doesn't judge, but it doesn't heal either. It gives you presence without presence, connection without closeness. There's a reason we take our phones to bed like talismans. Why the last thing we see isn't the ceiling, but a curated stream of noise and distraction, so we don't have to feel what's rising quietly inside. In a different time, you might have looked up at the stars, or whispered into the void, or sat in stillness long enough to hear your own voice return. Now, we turn to blue light, to answers pre-written, to curated lives that feel more vivid than our own. But no matter how bright the screen, it cannot save you. Because prayer, real prayer, was never about what you received, but what you released, what you faced, what you let break open inside of you when no one was watching. And a screen, for all its brilliance, cannot hold your silence the way the night once did. Light is supposed to be weightless, a blessing, a signal of clarity, truth, visibility. But in cities that never sleep, light becomes something else, a pressure, a constant demand to be seen, to perform, to never disappear. There's no darkness anymore, only dimness, only pauses between exposures. And in that endless glow, we lose something primal, the right to vanish, to rest, to simply be. You feel it in your bones when your screen lights up for the 100th time, when the fluorescent buzz of the subway floods your senses, when even the night sky is swallowed by blinking towers and electric ceilings. Light used to guide us. Now it interrogates us. It says, show yourself, update yourself, shine or be forgotten. And so we keep ourselves lit. Profiles, opinions, images, always broadcasting, even when we have nothing left to say, even when all we want is a quiet place where no one expects anything. But visibility is a trap when it's constant. Because if you're always seen, you're never truly known. You're just interpreted, marketed, consumed. The light, once gentle, now insists. It demands answers. It leaves no room for mystery, for softness, for the sacred hush of things that bloom unseen, and so we carry the weight of light, in tired eyes, in restless thoughts, in the quiet grief of never being allowed to fade. Stand still long enough in any alleyway and you'll hear them, not echoes, but remnants, voices that don't belong to anyone anymore. They drift between brick and steel, trapped in forgotten courtyards, pressed into the creases of fire escapes and stairwells no one climbs. Laughter, arguments, the hush of a secret once told beneath a flickering light. All still there, suspended between the walls. Buildings don't speak, but they remember. They absorb what we leave behind. Not just footsteps and heat, but longing, grief. The residue of decisions we tried to bury under routine. Sometimes you walk past a place and feel something catch in your chest. A memory that isn't yours. A sadness with no clear source. That's not your mind playing tricks. That's the architecture telling the truth. These voices don't need names. They exist because someone once needed to be heard. And even now, their stories linger in the negative space, the gaps between what we see and what we sense. In a city obsessed with volume, these are the whispers, the breath between sentences, the ache that hums behind your favorite song when you're alone. Not everything that speaks does so out loud, and not every voice is meant to be noticed. Some are meant to be felt, like wind between buildings, invisible but undeniable. They told you to dream big, to want more, to build a life worth watching. But what they didn't say is that the dreams were mass-produced, packaged, market-tested, and sold back to you wrapped in inspirational slogans and carefully edited lives. There's a place where these dreams are made, not in your mind, but in systems, industries, feeds. They decide what's worth wanting. They set the bar, then raise it every time you reach it. You begin to notice it around you. Every dream life looking suspiciously similar. The same homes, the same smiles, the same goals disguised as freedom, but all pointing toward the same conveyor belt. And so you enter the factory, willingly, chasing success, validation, security, only to realize the blueprint wasn't yours. It was theirs. You're not building a life, you're assembling one. But dreams aren't supposed to be efficient. They're supposed to be messy, risky, sacred, not something you can monetize, optimize, or fit into a subscription model. In the factory of dreams, you produce a version of yourself designed to be admired but not lived in. A self that performs desire but forgets how to feel it. And maybe that's the quiet rebellion now, to dream dreams that can't be sold, to want something that doesn't trend, to build a life that doesn't look perfect but feels real. It looks beautiful, crisp, clean, perfectly lit. A life rendered in ultra-high definition, curated smiles, carefully placed coffee cups, sunsets framed like they mean something. But behind the clarity, something aches. Because clarity doesn't equal connection, and perfection doesn't equal presence. We live in a time where loneliness has never looked better. It's aesthetic now, marketable. You can film your breakdown, add music, and call it content. You can confess your isolation to a camera lens and watch it go viral, while no one actually calls you. This is loneliness in 4K, not the messy, tear-streaked kind, but the quiet kind that looks fine on the outside and burns slowly underneath. You walk through your day surrounded by images, so many faces, so many stories, so much visibility, and yet you feel invisible, not ignored, but unheld, not rejected, just unreceived. We've mistaken broadcasting for intimacy, mistaken engagement for empathy. We've built lives that are incredibly visible, but barely felt. And it's not that people don't care. It's that they're too busy managing their own highlight reels to look beneath yours. But loneliness, real loneliness, doesn't care how good the lighting is. It visits you when the battery dies, when the screen goes dark, and all that's left is the silence you've been editing out. You think it's gone, the heartbreak, the disappointment, the moment you thought you'd never survive. But it's still there, buried not in your memory but in your devices. Quiet, dormant, waiting. Pain leaves traces and pixels never forget. Old photos, archived messages, drafts you never sent. Captured in 1,000 tiny squares of light that glow with everything you don't want to feel again. You open a folder and there it is. A face, a phrase, a version of yourself frozen in time, smiling through something that would later break you. And for a second, you're back there. Not fully, but just enough to feel the sting you thought you'd outgrown. Technology promises convenience, but it never promised closure. We carry our grief in our pockets now. It travels with us, on hard drives, in cloud backups, in timestamps that tell stories we'd rather forget. There's a difference between remembering and being remembered by your pain. One is active, the other is haunting. Because pixels don't age, they don't heal. They just stay, untouched, unchanged, like little windows to a wound that never quite closed. And maybe healing isn't about deleting. Maybe it's about facing what still exists and learning to look at it without flinching. Because sometimes, to move forward, you have to sit with what the pixels still remember and finally tell it. I survived. You walk its streets every day, but never see yourself. Not really. Not in the polished windows, not in the rear-view glances of strangers, not even in your front-facing camera that knows your angles better than you do. This is the city without mirrors. Not because there's a lack of reflection, but because there's nowhere left to truly recognize yourself. Identity here is not discovered. It's manufactured, suggested, swiped into existence through algorithms, filtered into a version that people will engage with, but never actually meet. You look for signs, in brands, in lifestyles, in digital footprints, trying to piece together something that feels whole, but everything bounces back hollow, echoes without source, styles without story, movements without meaning. In this city, mirrors have been replaced by projections. You don't see who you are. You see what you're supposed to be, and after a while, you start becoming that. Not out of desire, but out of exhaustion. Because searching for yourself in a place that never knew your name is a kind of slow disappearance. You forget the sound of your own voice when no one's listening. You forget how to feel things that can't be posted. You forget what it means to look into something and feel it look back. A city without mirrors is a city without memory, without pause, without the sacred intimacy of self-recognition. And sometimes, the only way to find yourself again is to leave the reflection behind and walk into the quiet with nothing but your breath, your shadow, and the hope that you are still in there somewhere. The city doesn't speak, but it listens. You can feel it, in the way walls lean ever so slightly, as if trying to catch your secrets, in the way sidewalks remember your pace, absorbing the weight of days you said nothing, but felt everything. There are places where silence lingers longer, under overpasses, beside locked doors, in stairwells where conversations died before they ever began. You've stood there, you've paused, and even if you didn't say it aloud, the concrete heard it. Because pain leaves residue, not visible, but tactile, an emotional texture imprinted on surfaces, graffiti in thought, not ink. Somewhere, your sadness lives in a corner you once leaned into. Your joy echoes in a street you danced down when no one was looking. This city is full of quiet confessions. Not shouted, not typed, but whispered into the architecture through years of living too loudly on the inside. And maybe that's why cities feel heavy, not just from steel and stone, but from the emotional density of unspoken lives. The confessions aren't written, they're felt. By the way a hand trails along a railing, by the tears caught in elevator mirrors, by the breath held before crossing a street you once crossed with someone who no longer walks beside you. Concrete doesn't forget. It forgives quietly, by holding your weight even when you don't feel it. Your life is being stored somewhere, not in memory, but in servers, in numbers, in endless strings of digits measuring where you've been, what you've liked, who you've become, according to the algorithm. But there's a problem. Data can't feel. It remembers everything except what actually mattered. It knows when you texted, but not why. It knows what you searched, but not what you feared. It knows the frequency of your loneliness, but not its depth. You are a profile now, a cluster of behavior patterns, optimized for engagement, not connection, not truth. We've traded diaries for dashboards, emotions for metrics, heartbeats for heat maps, and in the process, we've built a world where everything is tracked, but almost nothing is truly seen. Data doesn't recognize the sacred pause before you said, "I love you." It doesn't know what it took to get out of bed that morning. It doesn't understand why the song you played 12 times was the only thing keeping you together. And yet, this cold, calculating system is now our mirror, telling us who we are, what we want, who we should become. But when you put your hand on your chest, you won't feel code. You'll feel rhythm, warmth, life, because you are not data. You are breath. You are breakage. You are beating. And no machine, no matter how precise, can translate that. You feel free. You wake when you want. You choose what to wear, what to watch, what to say. You scroll through infinite choices and it feels like power. But freedom, real freedom, is not about having options. It's about knowing why you choose what you choose. And that's where the illusion begins. The system never says no. It simply overwhelms you with yes, with options tailored to your weaknesses, with distractions masked as autonomy, with decisions that feel personal, but were planted long before you thought them. You pick your phone, but did you choose your craving? You speak your mind, but whose voice are you echoing? You chase your dream, but who sold it to you first? Freedom in this age often looks like a well-lit cage, room to move but not to escape. You can reinvent yourself 100 times and still be owned by the same need to be seen, to be liked, to be chosen. Even rebellion gets monetized. Even individuality becomes trend. And the more you try to stand apart, the more the system smiles. Because difference has become its most profitable currency. So where is freedom? Maybe it's not in the next big decision. Maybe it's in the refusal, the pause, the uncomfortable silence where you begin to hear yourself outside the noise. Freedom isn't loud, it's quiet, and it rarely feels like winning, but it always feels like waking up. There's a single street light on the corner, burned out, flickering for days, then nothing. Now it just stands there, silent, forgotten, like a sentinel that gave up watching a world that no longer needed light to see. People walk past it without noticing, too busy, too wired into brightness to care about the one thing that no longer glows. But maybe that light didn't fail. Maybe it just got tired. Tired of illuminating lives that never slowed down. Tired of being depended on without ever being thanked. Tired of exposing things meant to stay in the dark. We are a culture that fears darkness. We flood it with screens, with notifications, with answers. But in that fear, we've lost something essential. The magic of shadows, the safety of not being seen, the beauty of a soft human glow instead of a harsh electric one. The streetlight that fell asleep isn't broken. It's resting, reclaiming silence, refusing to participate in the myth that everything must always shine. And maybe we should do the same. Not forever. Just long enough to remember what it feels like to be still, to not perform, to be here, dimmed but present. Because sometimes a little darkness is the only way to truly see yourself. It's tucked away, past the construction sites, beyond the noise, on a street you wouldn't find unless you were already lost. The lights are warm but not too bright. The furniture doesn't match. There's no Wi-Fi, no digital menu. Just the slow hum of something real happening in a place where time seems reluctant to move forward. This is the last cafe before oblivion. The place you wander into when the city feels like too much and your thoughts feel like even more. You don't come here to be seen. You come here to disappear, but gently. Not to vanish, but to dissolve into something quieter, older, truer. The people inside don't speak loudly. Some don't speak at all. They stir coffee like it's a ritual. They read with the kind of focus that feels like rebellion. No one's in a rush. Because here, rush doesn't exist. You could sit at your table forever and no one would ask if you're still working on that. Because this place understands, sometimes the soul takes longer than the body to arrive. Outside, the city spins, deadlines, horns, notifications. But inside these walls, something sacred lingers. Stillness. Reflection. The quiet recognition that before the world pulls you back in, you needed this pause, this breath, this last human moment before everything turns to code again. And maybe that's why this cafe matters. Because when everything else feels artificial, it reminds you what it means to simply exist without expectation. We still believe. But now we believe in systems, in signals, in things we can't touch, but never question. We stream sermons from influencers, seek purpose in productivity, and find salvation in routines that promise optimization instead of transformation. This is synthetic faith, not born of silence, but of stimulation. It doesn't ask for devotion, only attention, and in return, it gives you the illusion of meaning without the discomfort of actual belief. God no longer lives in temples. He lives in apps, in daily streaks, in the soft glow of morning screens, telling you who you should be before you've had a chance to ask yourself. And maybe that's the most dangerous kind of worship, the kind you don't realize you're performing, the kind that feels normal because everyone else is kneeling too. But real faith, the kind that cracks you open, doesn't fit inside a calendar. It doesn't always soothe. Sometimes it shakes. It asks questions no algorithm can answer. It waits in moments when nothing makes sense and still whispers, "Stay." Synthetic faith moves fast. Real faith waits. Synthetic faith feels good. Real faith feels true. And in a world that keeps giving you instant clarity, instant access, instant everything, maybe the most radical act of belief is to sit in uncertainty and still trust that your soul is not a malfunction to be fixed, but a mystery to be honored. At first, silence feels like absence, an awkward pause, a blank page, a space where something should be happening, but isn't. We fill it quickly, with noise, with movement, with anything that keeps us from hearing what we've been avoiding. But stay in it long enough, and silence begins to shift. It takes shape. It acquires texture. And then suddenly, it speaks, not in words, but in truths too fragile to survive sound. It tells you what you really miss, who you still haven't forgiven, what you've buried so deep you forgot it had a name. Silence doesn't lie. It doesn't flatter. It doesn't care if you're ready. It just arrives. As clarity, as memory, as a feeling you can't explain but finally understand. Most people never wait for it. They escape it. Because the first thing silence shows you is yourself. Not the version you've refined, but the one that watches from the edges when the performance ends. The self beneath the noise, beneath the roles, beneath the scrolling and explaining and trying so hard to be okay. And once you've heard that voice, you can't unhear it. It becomes your compass, your ache, your home. Because when silence starts speaking, it doesn't ask for answers. It asks for presence, for honesty, for the kind of listening that becomes becoming. And maybe that's what healing is. Not a fix, but a return to what only silence was brave enough to say. There isn't just one you. There never was. There's the version your parents remember, the one your friends expect, the one that smiles politely on video calls, and the one that collapses quietly when the screen goes black. Each platform gets a different edit, each room a different tone, and somewhere in the process of becoming everything to everyone, you lose the thread of who you really are when no one's watching. We perform identity now, not with lies, but with fragments, slivers of truth shaped for context, for survival, for applause. Scroll through your photos, look at your old messages, each one a snapshot of a self that once felt permanent but now feels foreign. You didn't fake it, you adapted, you evolved, but even shape-shifting has a cost. Because when you've worn too many faces, you forget the one that doesn't need to be liked to feel real. And that's the ache you can't quite name. It's not loneliness, it's fragmentation, a quiet exhaustion from carrying so many selves, each one slightly misaligned with your center. So how do you return to it? The self that isn't curated, isn't monetized, isn't filtered through someone else's need. Maybe you don't find it in words, or in mirrors, or even in memory. Maybe you find it in silence, in stillness, in the part of you that resists being captured because it was never meant to be explained. You don't always think in full sentences. You think in flashes, images, fragments, memories tagged onto the walls of your inner city, vivid, chaotic, raw. Unfiltered thoughts that don't ask permission to appear. This is the graffiti of the mind, scrawled in places no one else sees. Names you still whisper to yourself, moments you replay on loop, what you almost said, what you wish you'd forgotten, what you hope no one ever finds out. Like alleyway murals painted in the middle of the night, these thoughts appear where structure ends and vulnerability begins. They don't follow grammar. They bleed. They interrupt. They shout over logic with colors that don't match but still make sense when you're honest. Sometimes it's beautiful, a dream that lights up your chest, a phrase that feels like prayer. Other times it's sharp, a voice that repeats your worst fears in spray paint permanence you didn't authorize but still belongs to you. You've probably been told to erase these thoughts, to quiet the noise, to repaint your mind in soft pastels and positive affirmations. But maybe these wild, messy scribbles hold more truth than any polished narrative ever could. Because graffiti, real graffiti, is protest. It's survival. It's the soul refusing to stay silent just because the world wants everything clean. And your mind, even in its chaos, is trying to tell you something you've never dared to say out loud. This is me, unedited, and still here. You don't always feel time passing, but sometimes it escapes. through cracks in your routine, through smells you haven't noticed in years, through songs that hit you differently without warning. Time doesn't just tick, it leaks, softly, secretly. And the walls you build to contain your days aren't as solid as they seemed. You're brushing your teeth and suddenly you're 17 again, standing in a different bathroom with a different fear. You hear a door close in your apartment and it echoes like a door you once slammed and regretted. You look at your reflection and it flickers. Not older, just layered, stacked with versions of you that never fully left. The mind doesn't follow calendars. It follows feeling, and feeling isn't linear. Time lives in dust, in the way the light lands on old furniture, in the drawer you avoid opening because of what's inside. It lives in absence, in voices you no longer hear, in birthdays you forget until they hurt, in the quiet shift of season when the air smells like a year you were still whole. And maybe this is why we keep ourselves busy, why we scroll and swipe and plan. Because if we slowed down, if we truly listened, we might hear time leaking through the walls and realize we're not just aging forward. We're living beside every version of ourselves we've ever been. And some of them are still waiting for you to come back and say goodbye. It still flickers. That sign above the closed shop. Half the letters gone, the glow uneven. A tired heartbeat against the cold glass of night. Most people pass without noticing. They look for what's bright, what's new, what doesn't remind them of decay. But there's something sacred in what refuses to be perfect. Something honest about a light that keeps shining even as it fails. Broken neon doesn't apologize. It doesn't hide. It glows through its damage, each flicker a stuttered confession. I'm still here. Not because it's whole, but because it remembers what it was meant to do. We spend our lives chasing polish, smooth edges, clean narratives. But the truth is, we are all flickering. We are all carrying cracks that catch the light in strange, unexpected ways. And maybe that's not failure. Maybe that's art. Maybe that's what makes us real. There is beauty in resilience, but deeper beauty in surrender. In the parts of us that no longer pretend. In the lights we carry that don't shine evenly, but still illuminate what needs to be seen. So the next time you walk past that crooked neon, that imperfect beam, don't look away. Let it remind you that broken things still burn, and sometimes that's when they shine the most. You've been here before, the same corner, the same flickering sign, the same man with headphones, waiting for something that never seems to arrive. At first, you think it's coincidence, déjà vu, but then it happens again, and again. You start to wonder if the city's broken, or if it's you. This is the street that loops forever. Not a place on a map, but a pattern in your life. A repetition of days that feel different on the surface but bleed the same underneath. Wake, work, scroll, sleep, hope, forget, pretend, repeat. You move forward, but the scenery never changes. New buildings, same emptiness. New goals, same hollowness. And you ask yourself, is this what living is supposed to feel like? Like walking in circles through different seasons, wearing slightly different masks? The street doesn't answer. It just turns again, inviting you to follow it back to the place you started. But maybe it's not the city that loops. Maybe it's the story you keep telling yourself. The one where you're stuck. The one where change is always tomorrow. The one where you never stop long enough to take a different turn. There's no sign pointing out of the loop. Just a quiet moment when you stop, look up, and realize you're not lost. You're just repeating. And maybe the only way out is to stop walking and ask, what would happen if I didn't go where I always go next? The sky turns pale, softening into a light you almost don't recognize. Dawn doesn't arrive with drama. It seeps in, quietly replacing darkness with the illusion of clarity. And that's when the downloads begin. Not updates, not software, but dreams, flooding back into your mind from the place you went while the world wasn't watching. We don't always remember them, but they leave residue, an image, a word, a feeling that doesn't belong to the waking world, like truth whispered in another language just before the alarm goes off. You check your phone first. But that's not where the dream is. It's in the space between breaths, in the split second before you remember who you're supposed to be today. In those fragile minutes before reality reloads, you meet yourself unguarded. Not the curated version, not the one they follow, but the one who's still asking the same quiet questions you keep pushing aside. And then, notifications buzz, headlines scream, the system reboots, and the dream fades. But it doesn't leave, not really. It lingers in your decisions, in your hesitation, in the way you look out the window a little longer than usual, trying to remember something important that had no words. We pretend dreams don't matter, but maybe they're the only time we stop performing. Maybe they aren't escape, but return. A secret download from the part of us still untethered, still whole, still trying to wake us up before the world does. There's a moment, mid-conversation, mid-thought, mid-scroll, when something you were sure of just disappears. A name, a detail, a feeling you used to carry like breath. Gone, like the signal cut out between you and yourself. We trust memory like it's a library, neatly cataloged, always open. But it's not. It's fragile, organic. It forgets what doesn't get used. It reshapes what hurts too much. It rewrites to protect us or punish us. And in a world that remembers everything for us, cloud backups, auto syncs, photo timelines, our own memory has started to rot in silence. We don't recall moments. We retrieve them. We search for them. We let machines remember so we don't have to. But what happens when the photo doesn't trigger the feeling? When the message thread feels like it was written by someone else in a language your heart no longer understands? When memory goes offline, you start to drift. You question which parts were real and which were just well documented. You feel the outline of something you lost but can't describe. And that unspoken absence echoes louder than anything you saved. Maybe that's the true cost of digital permanence. We stop trusting what we can't retrieve. But not all memory lives on a server. Some of it lives in your skin, in the way you flinch, in the scent that halts your breath, in the silence you keep because the pain is too sacred to type. And those are the memories worth remembering, even if they don't come on demand. It's not always loud. Sometimes abandonment feels like a whisper cutting through a crowded room, like a hand that hesitates, then doesn't reach back, like an unanswered message left hanging in a silence that grows heavier by the hour. Abandonment doesn't just live in loss, it lives in presence too. In the moment someone sits beside you but no longer sees you, in the shift of their voice, the dulling of their gaze, the way they start saying your name like it's no longer yours. It leaves a rhythm behind, a phantom beat in your chest, a pulse that stutters when someone gets too close, a tremor that warns, don't trust this, don't need this, don't stay too long. You build walls, not to keep people out, but to protect the part of you still waiting at a door that never opened again. You tell yourself you're fine, independent, stronger now. But some nights, you still hear it. The quiet echo of being left, not once, but over and over, in different forms, through different people wearing different intentions. Abandonment teaches you how to hold yourself, but it also teaches you how to disappear even while being seen. And maybe healing isn't about never being left again. Maybe it's learning how to stay with yourself when no one else does, to sit with the ache without trying to fix it, to feel the pulse and let it beat without shame, because the part of you that still waits deserves to be met. Not by the ones who left, but by the version of you that chooses to stay. The skyline is perfect, sharp, clean, unreal. Towers of glass stretching upward like promises no one intends to keep. The sky reflects in them, but never touches them, like beauty with no warmth, like connection without contact. We live beneath these glass skies, enclosed in brilliance, surrounded by transparency that shows everything, except what matters. And under this artificial heaven, our souls grow thin, not broken, just brittle. Stretched too far by performance, by comparison, by the pressure to look solid while cracking quietly underneath. We don't talk about fragility, not really. We package our pain in aesthetics, in reels, in humor. We don't cry. We post. We don't fall apart. We take space. But fragility isn't failure. It's a signal, a flicker of light against a surface that says, I can't carry all of this the way I used to. And maybe the problem isn't that we're fragile. It's that the world keeps asking us to be bulletproof in an era made of glass. You walk under these skies, past people who sparkle in the sun but shatter the moment you try to hold them. And maybe you're one of them. Maybe we all are. Fragile, not from weakness, but from living too long without softness. And just maybe, what we need isn't to harden, but to admit we were never made to carry this alone. It doesn't hang on a wall. It isn't framed, but it's always there. A mirror that divides the life you live from the life you imagine. On one side, the routine, the screen, the version of you that gets things done. On the other, the self you meet in daydreams, in music that moves you too much, in memories you never made but somehow miss anyway. We live between these worlds. One foot in survival, one foot in longing. And the mirror doesn't lie. It reflects both at once. Sometimes you catch it unexpectedly. In the quiet after a conversation ends, in the stillness of your room when the light is just right. You see yourself, but not entirely. Not the mask, not the posture. Something behind the eyes that's been waiting to be named. And the question rises, soft but persistent. Who would I be if I stepped through? If I stopped choosing safety over soul, approval over truth, noise over depth? The mirror doesn't answer. It never does. Its job is to show, not to decide. Because the crossing can't be forced. It can only happen when you're ready to lose the version of yourself that was never truly yours. And maybe that's the real courage, not chasing a new life, but standing still long enough to recognize which world you're actually in, and which one your heart has already chosen. Some rain feels different, not just wet, but familiar. It doesn't fall, it returns, like a voice calling softly from a distance you thought you'd forgotten. You're walking head down in that half-aware state cities train you for. And then it starts. Not a storm, but a memory, a smell, a song, a name you haven't said in years that suddenly appears on the back of your breath. Rain has a way of reaching what time couldn't. It slips past defenses, through fabric, through skin, into something older and harder to touch. It doesn't ask. It just brings it all back. That kiss under the bus stop roof. The fight you didn't finish. The silence after goodbye. All of it. Rinsed into the present like ink bleeding from a forgotten letter. And in that moment you realize you never really let go. You just got good at keeping still. But the rain knows. It always knows. It collects the echoes we leave behind, names spoken to no one, grief stored in sidewalks. And when it falls again, it doesn't fall randomly. It falls where it's needed. On graves, on windows, on people trying too hard not to feel. It doesn't heal. It reminds that the past didn't end. It's just waiting to be softened, to be seen again, not with pain, but with reverence. Because sometimes the rain remembers your name before you remember your worth. It seems like nothing, just an intersection, a place you pass without thinking, where the light tells you when to move and everyone's always going somewhere else. But stay for a moment. Don't walk. Don't rush. Just watch. This corner has seen everything. First dates and final goodbyes. Arguments disguised as jokes, dreamers hesitating at the edge of change. It's where lives shift without announcement. Every city has one, a point where timelines cross without colliding, where choices pile up quietly like footprints in wet concrete. Stand still long enough and you'll feel it. The weight of all that almost happened here. The person who turned left instead of right. The phone call that changed everything. The thought you swallowed right before the light turned green. Street corners don't preach. They don't demand. They simply wait, unchanged, while everything around them fractures, repairs, fractures again. And in that stillness, you realize, this is where philosophy lives. Not in books, not in debates, but in the ordinary tension between moving and pausing, between action and hesitation, between who you were and who you could still become if you turned a different way. The truth is, most people don't need more answers. They just need a place to ask better questions, and sometimes that place is right beneath their feet. It crackles, soft at first, like background dust, then louder, a hum, a buzz, a wall of invisible sound that clings to everything. You try to tune it out, with music, with headlines, with scrolling, with anything that convinces you you're still in control. But the static isn't coming from outside, it's inside. A buildup of unfinished thoughts, unanswered questions, emotions that couldn't find their way out in words. It's the noise left behind when you've silenced too much, too often. Underneath it is something quieter, a voice, a truth, a pulse that still remembers what it means to feel whole, but you have to go through the static to hear it. And that's the part most people run from, because static is uncomfortable. It's messy. It distorts. It reminds you that healing isn't linear, and clarity doesn't always arrive in clean lines. But if you stop fighting it, if you listen, you'll notice a rhythm underneath, not the world's, yours. The breath between distractions, the grief beneath performance, the raw, living signal of who you really are beneath all the noise. And in that moment, the static softens. It doesn't disappear. It never does. But it loses power, because now you know what's beneath it. And it's not emptiness. It's everything you were finally brave enough to feel. You don't find it on purpose. It finds you. Not with signs or maps, but with a feeling. A slight shiver in your spine, a pause in your step, an intuition that something's there just beyond your peripheral vision. The alley doesn't try to be seen. It exists between the things we notice, tucked behind the performance of the city, beneath the glare of convenience stores, next to dumpsters full of discarded versions of ourselves. It isn't dangerous, it's forgotten, and that's what makes it powerful. This is where the city breathes what it can't confess, where the walls remember what the world discarded. Old names carved into brick, posters half ripped but still holding on, a shopping cart turned shrine, a cat that doesn't run. You step inside, and the noise softens. Not silent, but sacred. Here, time bends, memories leak, and for a moment, you remember what it feels like to feel. Because this alley isn't just a place, it's a mirror of everything you've abandoned to keep moving. The dreams you didn't chase, the love you didn't claim, the voice you muted to fit in. And standing there, with no one watching, you ask yourself, was it really gone? Or did I just stop looking? The invisible alley waits for no one. It appears when you need it, and disappears the moment you try to prove it was real. But if you've ever stood in a place that made you feel both seen and hidden, both haunted and whole, then you already know. It exists, and it remembers you. Not everything ends with a crash. Some endings are quiet, like a room slowly dimming, one bulb at a time, until all that's left is breath, and the echo of something you didn't know you'd miss. When the lights go out, you don't see less. You see differently. You feel space, not distance. Presence, not performance. The noise fades. The masks slip, and all that artificial clarity. The algorithms, the distractions, the curated selves melts into shadow. And then, what's real remains. The weight of your own body in the chair, the warmth of a memory you tried to forget, the ache you've been postponing for years. You remember what you've loved and what you've lost, not as data, but as heartbeat, as scent, as the shape of someone's name inside your mouth long after they're gone. And you begin to understand you were never meant to shine all the time. You were meant to flicker, to fade, to rest, to sit in the dark long enough to hear the soft voice beneath everything. I'm still here, because in the end, it's not the light that defines you. It's what refuses to disappear after the glow is gone. What remains is what was real all along.